there was an op-ed in the Seattle Times about the homelessness crisis, and it peddles a theory that is just false. It is just false. We've been talking about it for years. There is no data, no information you could give me that would convince me that our homelessness crisis is simply because people can't afford housing. One of the dumbest narratives, one of the laziest narratives. And this was from Naomi Ishaka in the Seattle Times columnist. Why are people homeless in Seattle? Look upstream, she argues. You can point to a lot of reasons why so many people in Seattle live unsheltered, but here's the bottom line. The rents are too damn high. So again, and this whole article wants to take this back to, oh, if there was only affordable housing for these people to be in. Now, We Heart Seattle and Andrea Suarez responded to this a few times. And look, I've seen a lot of unhinged articles from the Times, both the op-ed side and the newsroom, on homelessness that perpetuate this false narrative. But this one really caught Andrea's eye, and as you're going to hear from her momentarily, was infuriating because this narrative is leading to people's deaths. She responded to the Seattle Times article and said, gosh, this article is so misleading. We all must bifurcate the need for lower income affordable housing and recovery housing solutions for the homeless depicted tying tents up to a fence here. Come walk with us, Naomi, and interview why people are on the streets. It's drugs, by the way. And what she's pointing to is you've got this article with the Times, op-ed, although I think it's a similar sentiment to what the newsroom side of things in the Times acquiesces to this narrative from the governor. And you're showing a picture of these tents, tied up to a fence, as if the people wouldn't be living in those hellish conditions in tents if there was only an affordable place for them to live. Now, Andrea knows that's not true because she has made it her mission to get out there and figure out what's happening with these people in the tents. She actually goes out to the encampments. She actually talks to them. And it is drugs and mental health, or both, that leaves people living in those conditions. We spend billions on homelessness. If you are someone who is falling into homelessness simply because you cannot afford a place to live, you can go to any number of nonprofits and government contractors and get a place to live like that. And if you can't, that's a true failure of our system. But Andrea Suarez, we asked her to come on this morning to talk to us about why she was so frustrated with this Seattle Times op-ed. But then it just so happened, as she was, just before we were about to tape with her, a homeless couple, Kevin and Emily, they stopped by Andrea's We Heart Seattle office in downtown Seattle. And it was such a perfect example of the frustration that Andrea has with this Times narrative. Here's a cell phone video that Andrea took of this couple.
Hey, you guys just walked into my office. I haven't seen you in a minute. It's been a few months, but I've known you since Denny Park when you guys were living in a tent in the park. Emily and Kevin. Emily and Kevin. And we're talking today about what is the number one barrier that's keeping you guys from affording an apartment? Is it high rent? What is the immediate barrier that's keeping you from taking the next step towards housing?
Drugs.
Drugs, Naomi. Drugs, Seattle Times. Drugs, Governor Inslee. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe Andrea. Hell, you don't even have to believe your own eyes when you go walk down 3rd Avenue, or really the downtown in any city in our state. But you sure as hell should believe it straight from the horse's mouth when they tell you that they would have a roof over their head if not for drugs. Who else do you have to hear it from to shut up about this narrative? A narrative that is killing people. Killing people. Anyway, Andrea came on to respond to the Seattle Times op-ed. Andrea, welcome back to Undivided.
Thank you. Good morning, Brandi.
Yeah, the Seattle Times has, I think, long bought into this narrative that's pushed that the homelessness crisis is simply a lack of affordable housing. I think they've been doing that for a long time. So why did this particular article in the Times strike you?
The headline should be any amount of rent is too high for somebody with untreated mental illness and substance abuse disorder. It's just so disingenuous and naive to publish something like that, showing tents tied up to the fence as if it was high rent that put them there. If the Seattle Times would spend more time boots on the ground in and out of these low barrier housing units, they'd see that free rent or $25 a month rent or low barrier of any kind is simply putting people indoors in the same squalid conditions as they are outdoors. It's doing the very people we're all trying to serve a huge disservice when something like that is published. And you can see through public opinion why it went viral, my comments, because people are sick and tired of this narrative. It's harming our neighbors, our community, our economy.
And as you said, boots on the ground. No one's had more boots on the ground than you have. And you've seen firsthand what people are dealing with in tents and also what they're dealing with in housing. You sent us some pictures this morning of a story that I think illustrates the point you're making very well. Share it with everyone.
Yeah, one of our clients we met in a woodland park in a tent. He's been in and out of detox many times. He finally got into housing, which was $25 a month. We went and visited him. There was feces, blood, vomit, foils everywhere, squalid living conditions, rotting food. And I said no more. We got him an ambulance and coordinated with family back in Spokane and got him home. And, it's just a perfect example of he wasn't even paying his $25 a month rent. We were trying to prevent him getting evicted through that. And it's over and over and over again. We've been in and out of Catholic Community Service, Plymouth Housing, tiny house villages. They're trying under failed policy to do the right thing. Don't hate the player, hate the game. And I know these folks are working really hard. We talk about burned out staff and low wages. It's the unintended consequence of failed harm reduction and housing first policy that's burning people out. You can't succeed under these policies, and it's killing people right in front of our eyes, indoors and outdoors.
Yeah, it's a perfect illustration of something I've said, about my own father who dealt with substance abuse and homelessness. We could have put him in a $1 million mansion. He still would have died drug addicted and mentally ill. And so I guess what do you think is the motivation? Is it just ideological for the Times to continue to push what is a false narrative?
It's like an unwillingness to be more curious and truly bifurcate housing for low income veterans, single families. I think we're all in agreement. Yes, more affordable housing, public transportation and bus lines and that kind of infrastructure should allow people to get into their downtown jobs that are gig workers. We've built all that infrastructure. Not everybody can live downtown, right? So we build all that transportation. So we've sort of solved it there. Housing for the street homeless that we see living rough, overdosing on our streets, suffering, living in these squalid living conditions, or this Hooverville that's in Soto she made reference to. This is completely separate. The housing and healthcare crisis is a separate conversation. If you want to buy a hotel, make those hospital rooms, turn them into a place for respite and detox, bring in the National Guard. This is a state of emergency. People are dropping like flies, 115 overdose reversals a week that are reported by Seattle Fire Department. So just bifurcate the two. All Seattle Times has to do is say, we're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
That's it. All you got to do is do that. The statistics quoted, these under 20% statistic that this homelessness is rooted in mental health and substance abuse disorders is egregiously false.
Yeah.
100% of people tied to those fences are on fentanyl or Fetty rock. In fact, fentanyl addicts are like, it's not even fentanyl pills anymore. It's Fetty. Go out and learn, get out there and tour these homes, get into the camps, get to know people and their stories, and you'll realize this has nothing to do with high rent. Yeah,
and it's shocking to me that, as you say, that people aren't bifurcating this by now. Of course, we have an affordable housing crisis in Washington state. People, at two-income households that are working class can't afford to buy a house. That's an affordable housing crisis. But it is much different than what's facing people who choose to live in squalor in a tent, on a sidewalk surrounded by trash and feces. I mean, how many dead people, Andrea, have you found personally?
Our volunteers have found 12 people in RVs, cars, tents. The pictures I sent you earlier, that man would not have lasted another 4 hours, according to the paramedics. So people are being left there to languish and die. I don't understand why we are not putting all outreach, any outreach that's funded. I'm talking Urban League, Catholic Community Services, Reach. We need everybody outside marching through our streets into the camps. I know they are to a degree, but we need more. We need more people. There's something wildly wrong that at least We Heart Seattle is going within 20 feet of the tent, knocking on the van door, knocking on the RV, saying, anybody home, welfare check, and finding out that people have not just been passed away for a minute, but years. We found a man down to the skeleton right on Dexter Ave in urban downtown Seattle, steps from residential communities. There's something egregiously wrong with the don't go on slopes and don't go within 20 feet of a tent policy. Stop it now. Full stop.
It's a disgusting lack of, well, they call it empathy. It is the opposite of empathy. Everything that the city of Seattle is doing, everything that Washington State is doing. I wanted to ask you, Andrea, because I never got a chance. We had broke this news back in the fall about Governor Inslee's right-of-way initiative, where they were spending money to clear encampments along state highways, essentially, and then try to get people out of homelessness. And the figure that we revealed based on state data is, so they spent $143 million for the first, go about with this. And it cost them about $1 million per person to get them out of one of those encampments and out of the homelessness system, as they characterize it. What could We Heart Seattle do with $143 million?
We would build 6-month recovery oriented housing, much like the Salvation Army has, rinse, repeat. Anybody that's through recovery, I'm really looking forward to having Tom Wolf on your show in a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. It's a 6-month mandatory, whether it's court ordered or your family won't take you back or your job won't take you back. No one's going to do it on their own. It shouldn't be faith-based. Love Salvation Army, but rinse, repeat, build those hotels into 6-month adult recovery programs. With programming like litter picking and yoga and coloring and 12-step, whatever that looks like, but there has to be something for people to do every day. Last week on Valentine's Day, I had 25 men from Plymouth Housing show up for basic needs stipends to pick up more than 10,000 pounds of trash for us. They were like, thank you for giving us something to do all day. People indoors, outdoors are begging for something to do. They're sick and tired of being coddled and frankly, collateral damage for broken ideology.
Yeah. Andrea, what is it going to take? I mean, what is it going to take when you've got the newspaper of record? What are you pointing to? Oh, vote. Your pin that says vote. That is what it's going to take. Andrea,
education, it's voter education. Our direct action is these organized litter picks that unveil, why was there 1 million pounds of trash? Why were there 35,000 needles? Why are there 12 dead bodies? To our undivided voters, get out, get educated, and vote. And maybe We Heart Seattle and our platform is a de facto voter guide, a pamphlet, if you will. We're looking at forming a 501c4 so that we can scream from the mountaintops who to elect, what lobby and policy you should be voting for. And but you have to get educated. And the best way to get educated is to get out and learn for yourself. Join a nonprofit, go volunteer at a pantry, go volunteer with We Heart, or form your own community-based direct action. Maybe it's security oriented, a block by block approach, and see what's working and what's not. Because like that Seattle Times article, you cannot believe everything you read.
No. Yeah. And it shouldn't be, to me, you say voter guide and stuff. A huge red flag, maybe number one red flag, if you care about seeing the homelessness crisis solved, is don't vote for someone who says it's an affordability crisis. That's like, for me, red flag number one to that person is not going to be able to solve a dang thing. Andrea, before I let you go, I want to ask you one quick thing about a story we just discussed on the podcast, because it's sort of in your area of expertise. You mentioned Plymouth Housing. There is a lot of anger from some communities right now. Kenmore was supposed to get a Plymouth Housing facility. They shut it down at the last minute. Now it might go to Redmond, but state lawmakers Democrats are trying to push through a bill that would basically say you've got to do it, or we're going to try to take funding from you. So trying to put these facilities in communities that might not want them. Do you think that's an effective way to go about it? I'm assuming you've been tracking this, so do you have any particular thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, a recent example is the Central District encampment that's completely surrounding a school district, a daycare center, and small businesses. And right there is a King County low barrier housing complex, and all the dealers know where their customers are. And that's the fear, is you're going to attract this ecosystem of various criminal behavior, dealing, sex trafficking, squalid living conditions, and everybody sets up camp where their customers are. And a lot of those people that are outside those housing complexes aren't unhoused. They frankly live there, but they come outside and they still, harm the community overall. So what I'd love to see, and excuse me, London Breed just did this in San Francisco, bold move. She required that low barrier hotel that they put in their Chinese international district, people be enrolled in drug and alcohol counseling. They have to be enrolled in a 12-step program. Meet the compromise. I think if there is a compromise there, that this is a progressive housing unit where there's a requirement to enroll and reach self-sufficiency, that the community should then therefore accept that, because we got to give people a chance and a hand up. So I'd love to see these housing projects be turned into adult recovery centers with mandated enrollment into drug and alcohol 12-step program of some kind.
Yeah, and keep the community informed. Don't, like in Soto, when they had the homelessness complex, King County was trying to ram down their throats without input. That's never going to be met well by a community. And so be transparent with them. Talk to them about it every step of the way. Be realistic about what the possible consequences of it might be and how you plan to deal with those consequences. It's the secrecy and the pushing through of things that is never going to work in a community. So, Andrea, you're the best.
Thank you, Brandi. I just want to tie off my message to King County Regional Housing Authority and our leadership is to fund outreach, or demand that the existing outreach compassionately intervene on the ground. Forget about housing. Triage right then and there before arrest, to detox, through motivational interviewing, through gentle persuasion. It's time. Fentanyl will kill you in 2 years. Let us take you on a path towards detox. Oxford Housing, Weld Housing, Pioneer Human Services Housing, Battlefield Addiction, Remnant Army. There is a ton of places for people to go once they're discharged. That's the path out. More assertive, compassionate intervention forward outreach. Start there, not top down, bottom up, ground up with outreach.
100% common sense. Man, if I were the governor, I'd be taking my taxpayer checkbook, and I'd be signing over all $143 million from my failed efforts over to Andrea Suarez and We Heart Seattle. I'm not the governor.
Or just change the policy.
They're not going to do that, but yes.
Okay.
I would love you dictating the state policy, because I think we'd be in a much better place. Andrea Suarez, we appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day.
I love Andrea. Truth teller. That's all we need. We need some people who are willing to go down, do the hard work, see things for themselves, and then tell the truth. Why can't we have more politicians who tell the truth? And look, I know that I've been hard on people today. And I have a show called Undivided, and invariably I get these responses from no-name people on social media like, doesn't seem very undivided to me, Brandi. What is dividing us are people like the governor, who calls local elected leaders feckless because they don't do what he wants them to do. What's dividing us are outlets like the Seattle Times that push a narrative that is completely false on homelessness, so much so that that's all everyone focuses on, and we don't fix the actual problem, and so people die. That's what's dividing us. We have to cut through these narratives, these ideologies that are doing nothing but dividing our communities and pulling us further and deeper into the gutter. And so, yes, I will be hard on them, because they are those policies being driven by ideology, outlets like the Times that just fall right in line, are attributing so much to the divisive nature of our political discourse and the ineffective nature of our political discourse. Because you have someone like Andrea Suarez who's like, hey, here's some pictures of what happens when you put a drug addict in affordable housing. Here's a video of 2 homeless people who've been offered housing 1 billion times and say they don't want it because they want to be using drugs. So you've got that, but then you've got the governor, and you've got others in power, and you've got the Seattle Times, the newspaper of record, saying, yeah, but that's not true. And then people just choose to believe who aligns more with their ideology. And reality doesn't even factor into the equation. So you want to know how we get undivided? It's by shutting down the insanity. And that can include the media, and that can include politicians.